It was a Tuesday afternoon, the kind where you feel like you're swimming against the current just trying to get through the day. My name's Luke, and I was hustling to finish work early because Sarah, my wife of 8 years, had forgotten her lunch on the kitchen counter. She'd been working a lot of late nights at the office lately, and I figured a nice gesture like bringing her lunch might ease some of her stress. Sarah's job at Mitchell, Price and Allen Consulting had been eating up more and more of her time, and while I was proud of her drive, I couldn't help but feel like our lives had slowly turned into separate circles barely touching at the edges. But hey, that's what happens in marriage, right? You power through. Anyway, I hopped into my car, grabbed the forgotten lunch bag off the counter, and drove downtown to her office building. The place was one of those sleek, glass monstrosities that looked more like a futuristic prison than a workplace. I pushed open the doors and was met with that sterile, corporate air, cold, efficient, impersonal. "Hey, is Sarah around?" I asked the receptionist, a young woman who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. She's in Mr. Hawkins' office, I think," she said with a vague wave in the direction of the elevators. Her boss. A flicker of something I couldn't quite name brushed through me. I shook it off and headed for the elevators, balancing the lunch bag in my hands as I pressed the button for the top floor. When the doors slid open, I stepped into a hushed corridor lined with thick glass walls. I could see into the office on the far end, where Sarah and her boss, Richard Hawkins, stood close together, faces animated. A work discussion, I figured. As I got closer, I realized I could hear faint laughter. My wife's laughter. My steps slowed. Something felt off. I was only a few feet away when I heard Sarah's voice, the warm, familiar tone she used when she was feeling playful. "You're going to have to do better than that, Richard." He leaned in closer to her, smirking. "Oh, I'm just getting started, Sarah." My heart skipped a beat, and not in a good way. Before I could gather my thoughts, my hand slipped and knocked on the glass door. The two of them sprang apart like teenagers caught sneaking out after curfew. Sarah's face went pale when she saw me standing there. "Luke, what are you doing here?" she asked, her voice too bright, too forced. I held up the lunch bag. "You forgot this," I said, my own voice sounding flat and strange in my ears. Richard leaned back against his desk, arms crossed casually like he had nothing to hide. But the way his eyes flicked to Sarah, the tension in the room, I knew there was more to this. "Thanks, babe," Sarah said, walking over to take the bag. Her fingers brushed against mine, but it felt like a ghost touch, distant and cold. "Long meeting?" I asked, unable to keep the edge out of my voice. "Just going over some projections for next quarter," she replied too quickly. "Nothing exciting." Richard gave me a tight smile. "You must be proud of her. Sarah's really been pulling her weight around here." The way he said it made me feel like I'd swallowed a rock. I didn't know it yet, but I just stepped into the first chapter of a nightmare I couldn't have seen coming. A nightmare that would tear apart everything I thought I knew about my wife, her job, and the life we'd built together. But hey, at that moment, I was just the clueless husband bringing a forgotten lunch, and Sarah was just a wife working late. Or so I thought. The drive home was a blur. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, but my mind was stuck in that office, in that moment when Sarah and Richard had sprung apart like guilty teenagers. I told myself I was overreacting. Maybe they were just joking around. Maybe I was just seeing things because I had been feeling distant from Sarah lately. But the way she looked at me, like I wasn't supposed to be there, like I just walked in on something I wasn't meant to see. That night, Sarah came home later than usual. "Late night?" I asked, sitting on the couch, pretending to be engrossed in some rerun. "Yeah." Richard had me double-checking the numbers for a client proposal. Her voice was steady, too steady. She tossed her purse onto the counter and started toeing off her heels, not even looking at me. "Thanks for bringing my lunch, by the way." "No problem," I said, watching her closely. "Seemed like you and Richard were having a good time in his office." Her hands froze on the strap of her purse, just for a second. Then she turned, flashing me a bright, tired smile. "We were just joking around. He's actually a pretty decent boss once you get to know him." I didn't buy it. Maybe a month ago I would have. Hell, maybe even last week. But something about the way she said it, the way she was suddenly so careful with her words, set my gut on fire. "You never mentioned him before?" I said, keeping my voice light. Sarah laughed, brushing past me toward the bedroom. "Because I didn't think you'd care." The way she dismissed it so easily should have been reassuring. It wasn't. Something had shifted. The next few days I started paying attention. Really paying attention. Sarah's phone was suddenly never out of her sight. She had always been casual about leaving it on the coffee table or the nightstand. But now it was either in her hand or face down, screen hidden. She started working out more, which on its own wouldn't have been weird. But Sarah wasn't the early morning gym type. She was the yoga once a week because she felt guilty type. Suddenly, she had a whole new routine. And then there were the late nights. Not just one or two. Constantly. "We're swamped," she kept saying, always with the same exasperated sigh, like she was just as exhausted by it as I was. But her eyes were lit up in a way that had nothing to do with exhaustion. I was losing her. And the worst part? I didn't even know to what. I thought it was just some sleazy office fling. That maybe she was looking for a thrill. Some midlife excitement she thought I couldn't give her. But the truth was so much worse. I just wasn't there yet. One night, around midnight, I woke up to an empty bed. The bathroom light was off. No sound in the kitchen. My stomach knotted as I swung my legs over the edge of the bed, rubbing my eyes. Then I heard it. A soft, muffled voice. I followed the sound, my heart pounding in my ears. It was coming from outside our back patio. Through the sliding glass door, I saw Sarah, sitting on one of the chairs, wrapped in a blanket, phone pressed to her ear. She was laughing. Not a polite chuckle, not a work joke kind of laugh. A soft, intimate, comfortable laugh. The kind of laugh you give to someone you feel close to. I couldn't hear much, but I caught one word that sent ice through my veins. "Richard." I stood there, frozen, as she murmured something and hung up. She sat there for a second, staring at her phone, her lips pressed together in thought. Then she sighed, stood up, and turned back toward the house. I barely made it back to bed in time. When she slipped under the covers, I felt her hesitate, like she could sense I was awake. But I kept my breathing steady, played the part. I needed more than suspicions. I needed proof, and I was going to get it. After that night, something inside me snapped. Maybe I should have confronted her right then and there. Maybe I should have grabbed her phone and demanded answers. But no, I needed to be smart about this. If Sarah was lying to my face, I needed proof. Real, undeniable, burn the house down proof. And I was going to get it. The next morning, I played it cool. Kissed Sarah on the forehead as she got ready. Told her to have a good day at work. Watched as she smiled at me like nothing was wrong. Like she wasn't sneaking around behind my back. I waited until she left before I started digging. Her laptop, password protected. Of course. Her phone? Always on her. No chance of cracking that. But her car? That was fair game. I grabbed my spare key, slipped outside, and climbed into the driver's seat. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. Shoved between the seat and the center console was a receipt. One from a fancy little hotel downtown. A 5-star hotel. From 2 nights ago. For 2 people. I stared at that piece of paper for a full minute, my mind struggling to keep up with my pulse hammering in my throat. This wasn't a work dinner. This wasn't a harmless misunderstanding. Sarah was sleeping with him. And just like that, my whole world shifted. I spent the next 2 days watching her closer than ever. She had no idea. She still kissed me in the morning. Still laughed at my dumb jokes over dinner. Still pretended like everything was fine. And that was what burned the most. I wasn't dealing with a guilty wife, full of shame and remorse. No, Sarah was comfortable, confident. She had built this entire double life so well. She actually believed she was going to get away with it. She thought I was an idiot. But the thing about idiots, sometimes they learn faster than you think. By Friday, I couldn't take it anymore. I was done playing detective. So I set a trap. Sarah had mentioned another late night at work. Big project, tight deadline. Wouldn't be home until after midnight. Perfect. At 7:30, I grabbed her lunch from the fridge, on purpose this time. Texted her. Hey, you left your dinner. Thought I'd bring it by. See you soon. Love you. She didn't reply, but when I got to her office, she wasn't there. My stomach churned as I stood in that empty, dark office space, staring at Sarah's empty desk. I knew where she was, and I knew exactly what I was about to walk into. 15 minutes later, I was pulling into the same 5-star hotel from the receipt. My hands were shaking as I parked, adrenaline screaming through my veins. I don't know what I expected. To find them at the bar? Cozy in a corner booth? I was not prepared for what I actually saw. Room 1423. The door was cracked open. Just a little. Just enough. Enough for me to see my wife half naked, pressed up against her boss, moaning his name like he was the love of her life. For a moment I just stood there, watching, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to, because once I stepped through that door, there was no coming back from this. I gripped the lunch bag in my hand, my knuckles going white, and then I pushed the door open. Hope you're hungry, Sarah screamed. Richard jumped back like he'd been hit by a truck. I took one step inside, looked my wife dead in the eye, and tossed the lunch bag onto the bed between them. Hope you're hungry, babe. Wouldn't want you to miss dinner. Sarah's face drained of color so fast I thought she might faint. Richard? He was scrambling to grab his pants, stammering out some bullshit excuse. But I wasn't looking at him. I was looking at her. And Sarah? She looked like she had just seen a ghost. And she should. Because this was just the beginning. The room was dead silent, except for the sound of Richard fumbling with his belt like a dumbass who just realized he was about to die. Sarah? She just stood there, frozen, half naked, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. I took a slow step inside, letting the door swing shut behind me. The look on her face? Priceless. Luke! She started, voice shaking. No. Please, continue. I gestured between them. I'd hate to interrupt. Richard cleared his throat, trying to puff up like some big shot. Listen, Mann. I turned on him so fast he flinched. Oh, we're not gonna do this, I said, my voice so calm it scared even me. You don't get to talk. Not after you just had your dick in my wife. He swallowed hard, stepping back, and Sarah finally snapped out of her shock. Luke, please let me explain. I laughed. Actually laughed. Loud enough that she jumped. Explain, I echoed. Oh yeah, Sarah. I'd fucking love to hear the explanation for this. What was it, a work meeting? Team building exercise? I turned back to Richard, who was still standing there like a goddamn idiot. Was this a fucking performance review, Richard? He didn't answer. Sarah stepped toward me, still trying to cover herself with the sheet. Like that was gonna fix anything. I swear. It's not what you think. Oh, it's not? Because from where I'm standing, it looks exactly like what I think. Her lower lip trembled. Good. Luke, please, she whispered, reaching for me. I stepped back. She froze. And for the first time that night, I saw something real flicker across her face. Panic. Not guilt. Not shame. Panic. Like she hadn't actually believed she'd get caught. Like this wasn't part of the plan. That's when I knew. This wasn't just some affair. This was bigger. And I had a feeling I was about to find out just how deep the rabbit hole went. Sarah's face was a mess of panic and desperation. Like she was trying to reboot her brain fast enough to figure out how to spin this. Richard, on the other hand, was still fumbling with his belt, looking anywhere but at me, probably praying I wouldn't knock his teeth out. And let me tell you, it took everything in me not to. I stood there, breathing slow and deep, my fists clenching and unclenching at my sides. My whole body felt like a live wire, ready to snap and burn this entire room to the ground. Sarah took another step toward me. Luke, I swear, it's... I held up a hand and she shut the fuck up immediately. I don't want to hear a single goddamn lie come out of your mouth, I said, my voice so low I barely recognized it. Because if you think you can bullshit your way out of this, You're even dumber than I thought. Sarah flinched like I'd slapped her. Good. She deserved worse. Richard finally found his voice, straightening up like he wasn't standing there in half-buttoned dress pants. Look, man. I know this looks bad. But I turned on him so fast he backed up into the dresser. Oh, you don't get to speak, I said, voice deadly calm. You don't get to look me in the eye after fucking my wife and act like we're about to have a civil conversation. He paled. Actually paled. Like the weight of what was happening was just now sinking in. Sarah shot him a sharp look. Richard, just let me talk to him. Okay? He hesitated, then nodded, grabbing his shirt off the floor and slipping past me toward the door. I didn't stop him. Not yet. Because Sarah? She was the one I wanted answers from first. The second the door clicked shut, I turned back to her. She was standing there, the sheet still clutched to her chest like it could somehow protect her from what was coming. I just stared at her. I wanted to say something. Wanted to scream or break something or demand she tell me why the fuck she did this to me. But all I could do was laugh. A low, humorless laugh that made her eyes widen in fear. You know? I said, shaking my head. I actually felt bad about us lately. Thought maybe I wasn't doing enough. Maybe I wasn't being the husband you needed. I let out another bitter laugh. Turns out, I was just being a fucking idiot. Luke, no, don't say that. I snapped my gaze to hers. Don't say what, Sarah? The fucking truth. She opened her mouth, probably about to launch into some pathetic excuse. But I wasn't done. How long? I demanded. Her mouth shut. I stepped forward, towering over her now. How long? She swallowed hard. Luke, please. Don't please me, I snarled. Tell me how long you've been fucking your boss behind my back. Tears welled up in her eyes. But not real tears. Not the kind that come from actual guilt. No, these were manipulation tears. I had seen Sarah cry before. I knew her real tears. And these were a desperate attempt to soften me up. To make me see her as the victim. I wasn't falling for it. 6 months? She finally whispered, voice barely audible. My stomach dropped. 6 fucking months. Half a goddamn year of lying to my face. Of sneaking around. Of coming home to me and pretending like she wasn't giving another man everything that was supposed to be mine. I felt my jaw tighten so hard it hurt. And you were just... What? I said, voice eerily calm. Planning on doing this forever? Letting me play the role of the dumbass husband while you ran around with him? Sarah shook her head fast. No. No, Luke. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? I snapped. She hesitated. I could see the wheels turning in her head. She was about to lie. And that was what made me snap. I grabbed the hotel receipt out of my pocket, the one I had found in her car, and threw it at her. She jumped as it hit her chest and fluttered to the floor. What the fuck is that, then? I demanded. Sarah stared at it, her mouth opening and closing. Luke, I laughed, shook my head. Save it, I said, stepping back. I don't need to hear whatever bullshit excuse you're about to pull out of your ass. Her hands flew to her face, and for the first time, I saw real fear in her eyes. Not guilt, not shame, fear. Like she knew something I didn't. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just about the cheating. There was something else. Something she was hiding. I narrowed my eyes at her, my pulse thundering. What else aren't you telling me, Sarah? Her breath hitched. What? I took another step forward. You heard me, I said, voice low. Dangerous. What the fuck else is going on? Sarah's lip trembled. She looked like she wanted to bolt. And then, she burst into tears. The full-on, ugly sobs. And for the first time that night, I knew I had barely scratched the surface of this mess. Because Sarah, she wasn't just cheating. She was in deep fucking trouble. And now so was I. Sarah collapsed onto the bed, shaking, her sobs loud and broken. But I didn't move. I didn't comfort her. Because this wasn't about her pain. This was about mine. This was about 6 fucking months of lying. This was about the way she looked at me like I was a fool. Every night she came home late. kissing me goodnight with the same mouth she'd had all over him. I clenched my jaw, my hands trembling at my sides. "Sarah," I said, voice tight. "Talk." She just sobbed harder, her hands covering her face. I took a deep breath, trying to keep myself from losing my shit. "Sarah, if you don't tell me what the fuck is going on, I swear to God, it's not just the affair," she suddenly wailed, her voice cracking. My stomach dropped. I knew it. I fucking knew it. I took a slow step closer. "What do you mean, not just the affair?" She hiccuped through her sobs, her whole body shaking. "Richard, he needed my help." "Your help?" I echoed flatly. She nodded fast, wiping at her face. My hands curled into fists. I could already tell I was about to hate whatever came next. He had some financial problems," she stammered. I helped him move some money around at work. It was just supposed to be a temporary thing. I swear." I froze. "Money?" My voice dropped, dangerously low. "Sarah, what the fuck did you do?" She choked out another sob. I moved some company funds. Just a little. Richard said we'd put it back before anyone noticed." I laughed. A cold, humorless, bitter fucking laugh. Because of course it wasn't just an affair. No, Sarah had to go and commit financial fraud while she was at it. "You stole money?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Sarah flinched, shaking her head.
No.
"No, You stole company money?" I roared, finally snapping. Sarah broke down completely, sobbing so hard she could barely breathe. But I wasn't done. Not even fucking close. I ran a hand through my hair, pacing, trying to process this absolute shitstorm I had just walked into. It wasn't just a betrayal. It wasn't just cheating. It was embezzlement. And if she got caught, I'd be the one left cleaning up her mess. My name was on our joint accounts, our mortgage, everything. If this thing blew up, it wouldn't just take down Sarah. It would take down me too. I spun on my heel, glaring at her. "How much?" Sarah hiccuped. What? How much?" She squeezed her eyes shut, her shoulders trembling. "Over 100,000. My heart stopped. I actually had to sit down before I fucking passed out. $100,000. That wasn't pocket change. That was prison time. I stared at her, my mouth dry. You stole 100 grand? Sarah shook her head frantically. "It wasn't all at once. It was in small amounts. Richard said that's how you do it, so it's harder to track." I let out a sharp breath, staring at the ceiling like maybe, just maybe, God would fix this fucking mess for me. But nope, I was on my own. And Sarah? Sarah was sitting there, sobbing into her hands, waiting for me to save her. Waiting for me to say it would be okay. Waiting for me to fix this. And you know what? I wasn't going to. I wasn't about to go down with this sinking fucking ship. Sarah made this mess. And now, she was going to drown in it. I sat there, staring at the woman I thought I knew, trying to understand how the fuck we had gotten here. Sarah, my wife, was sitting on a hotel bed, half naked, crying not just because I had caught her cheating, but because she had also stolen over $100,000 from her company with her boss. And somehow she expected me to fix it. She sniffled, wiping her face like that would erase everything. "Luke, please," she whispered. I didn't mean for it to go this far." I laughed. A deep, bitter, ugly fucking laugh. "Oh, that's rich," I said, shaking my head. "You didn't mean for it to go this far?" "What part, Sarah? The cheating or the felonies?" She flinched. "Good." I leaned forward, my elbows on my knees, my voice low and sharp. "Tell me something. Did you ever actually love me? Or was I just your dumb fucking backup plan while you played house with your boss?" Her breath hitched. "Luke, don't." "Don't what?" I snapped. "Don't ask you the real questions? Don't make you say out loud that you pissed away 8 years of marriage for what? Some midlife thrill? A fucking scam." Tears streamed down her face now, her lips trembling. "Luke, I swear, I never wanted to hurt you." I shot up from my seat so fast she gasped. scrambling back against the headboard like I might actually hit her. But I didn't. I wasn't like her. I didn't destroy the people I was supposed to love. Instead, I just smiled. And that scared her more than if I had yelled. "Don't worry, Sarah," I said, smoothing down my shirt, "because this isn't my problem anymore." Her breath stalled. What do you mean?" I grabbed my phone, unlocked it, and turned the screen toward her. The color drained from her face, because right there on the screen was a recording. A perfect, crystal-clear audio recording of everything she had just confessed. I let that sink in before saying, "I was recording from the second I walked into this room." I tilted my head. "So thanks for all the details. They'll come in handy." Sarah sucked in a breath. "Luke, you wouldn't." I smiled. "Wouldn't I?" She lunged forward, grabbing my arm, her nails digging in. "Luke, please. If this gets out, I'll go to jail." "Yeah." I yanked my arm free, my voice cold. "That's kind of the fucking point." Her lips parted like she wanted to say something else. But I didn't give a shit anymore. I was done. I turned and headed for the door, but just as I grabbed the handle, Sarah's voice changed. It dropped, got harder. "You won't do it," she said quietly. I stopped, turned my head just enough to look at her over my shoulder. "What?" Sarah sat up, her hands gripping the sheets, her face still wet with tears, but her eyes? Dead fucking serious. "You won't turn me in," she repeated, watching me closely. "Because if I go down, so do you." I frowned. "Excuse me?" She swallowed, her gaze darting to the door like she was weighing her next words carefully. Then she took a breath and dropped the bomb. "The money's in our joint account." My heart stopped. I stared at her, my blood turning to ice. "What the fuck did you just say?" She let out a shaky breath. "Richard said I didn't think it would be a big deal, okay? I moved the money through your account a few times so it would look like normal deposits. But I swear, I was going to move it back before anyone noticed." My vision blurred. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. You used my name?" I whispered, my hands shaking.
Sarah nodded fast.
"Just on paper. It's still Richard's money, Luke. I swear. If anyone audits it, they'll see it's all tied to him, not you." I laughed. A full-body, hysterical fucking laugh. "You absolute fucking idiot." I ran a hand down my face, breathing hard. "You put my name on stolen money, Sarah. Do you even understand what that means?" She swallowed hard. It means you'll go to jail, too." I stopped breathing. Sarah's lip trembled. "If I go down, you go down with me." And that was when I knew. This wasn't panic. It wasn't remorse. Sarah had just laid out her trump card. She wasn't just begging for my help. She was blackmailing me. I took a slow, steady breath. Then I stepped forward, leaned in real close, and whispered in her ear, "We'll see about that." Then I turned, walked out the door, and left her there. Because this wasn't over. Not even fucking close. I drove home in absolute silence. No music.
No podcast.
Just the dull hum of my tires on the pavement as my mind spun out of control. Sarah had trapped me. This wasn't just some pathetic affair anymore. She hadn't just screwed around on me with her boss. She had dragged my name into a federal crime. And if she went down, I went with her. That thought sat like a fucking landmine in my chest, ready to explode. I should have seen it coming. The way she played dumb. The way she cried at the right moments. The way she waited until I caught her to tell me the truth. She had never planned to tell me. Not about the money. Not about the affair. Not about any of it. And now, she was gambling on the fact that I'd be too scared to turn her in. She thought she had won. She was so fucking wrong. I barely slept that night. Instead, I did what Sarah had never expected me to do. I fought back. First, I pulled every bank statement, every transaction, and every single deposit made in the past 6 months. If Sarah had funneled money through my account, I needed proof that I hadn't touched a dime. Then I called an old friend, Ethan Morales, private investigator, certified pain in the ass. and the only person I knew who could bury Sarah before she buried me. I met him at a shitty little diner off the highway, slid into the booth and laid it all out. Everything. The affair. The money. The fact that my own wife had turned me into an accessory to fraud. Ethan listened, stirring his coffee, his face unreadable. Then he leaned back and whistled. "Well, buddy," he said, shaking his head. "You're fucked." I scowled. "Gee, thanks for the insight." "But," he grinned, "Sarah's more fucked." I arched a brow. "Explain." He pulled out his phone, tapped a few times, and turned the screen toward me.
Surveillance photo.
Crystal clear. Sarah and Richard, entering hotels together, meeting in shady little cafes, signing documents. I felt my stomach flip. "You were already following her?" I asked, stunned. Ethan shrugged. "Not her. Richard." He smirked. "Your wife just happened to be the dumbass standing next to him." I exhaled hard, running a hand through my hair. This was it. This was the fucking way out. "She said the money was in my account," I said, forcing myself to think clearly. "If I turn her in, she'll try to pin it on me." Ethan nodded. "She could. But here's the thing. I've got proof she's been moving money out of Richard's personal accounts, too." I blinked. Wait, what?" "She's been double-crossing him." He smirked, skimming off the top. "Probably thinks she's slick." I stared at him. Sarah was stealing from Richard, too? Holy shit. This wasn't just cheating and fraud. Sarah had just set herself up to be destroyed from both sides. And all I had to do was light the match. 2 days later, the cops showed up at Sarah's office. I wasn't there to see it, but I imagined the moment perfectly. Sarah, sitting at her desk, acting like nothing was wrong. Until 2 men in suits walked in and said her name. Until she was dragged out in handcuffs in front of all her colleagues. Until her boss, her lover, realized that she had been stealing from him, too. And me? I was home, sitting on the couch, watching it unfold on the news. I took a sip of my coffee as the reporter's voice filled the room. Sarah Mitchell, an accountant at Mitchell, Price and Allen Consulting, was arrested today on charges of embezzlement and financial fraud. Authorities say over $100,000 was funneled through private accounts, including those of her employer, Richard Hawkins, who is also under investigation. I smiled, because that was the sound of karma. Sarah had spent 6 months making a fool out of me, but in the end, she had played herself. And as for me, I was finally completely free.